Martin Luther King Jr., defender of the dream. Hi everybody, and happy Friday! Today we're going to be learning about Martin Luther King Jr. At 11:30, there's a Google Hangout where I'll be reading the story live if you want to participate in our virtual classroom. And today's assignment, page 84, is due, so I need you to take a picture of it when you're finished and send it to me, or Miss Dillon, or Miss Kading. Don't forget that you also needed to log in to Edulastic on Wednesday to complete your pausing point assessment. We have learned about Susan B. Anthony. And Susan B. Anthony fought for women's rights to vote. We also learned about Eleanor Roosevelt. And Eleanor Roosevelt fought for human rights, which are food, shelter, jobs, and an education for all, because we are all human and should all have those rights. We have also learned about Mary McLeod Bethune, and she fought for African American girls to receive an education. We also learned about Jackie Robinson, and Jackie Robinson fought to break the color barrier in sports, so for all people to be able to play sports together. And the last person that we learned about was Rosa Parks. And what cause did Rosa Parks fight for? Rosa Parks fought for the civil rights movement, and she's often known as the mother of the civil rights movement. Civil rights are the rights that the government promises to every citizen in our country. Although slavery had ended after the U.S. Civil War, many African Americans didn't gain all of their civil rights. This fight for this cause, especially during the time of Rosa Parks, is called the Civil Rights Movement. Today, we're going to hear about one of the most important leaders of the Civil Rights Movement, Martin Luther King Jr. Martin Luther King Jr. was so important to our nation's history that there's a special day set aside each year to honor this man and what he did to make people's lives better. As a young African American boy growing up in the South, Martin Luther King Jr. witnessed and experienced discrimination. Martin knew that it was unfair, and it made him sad. As a young boy, he could not have known that he would grow up to become one of the most famous and respected civil rights activists and leaders in American history. So an activist is someone who takes action to achieve a goal. In his short life, he would challenge discrimination and change laws and attitudes. He would bring peace to all people and bring all races together. And this nation would become a better place because of him. Martin was born in 1929 in Atlanta, Georgia. Martin had an older sister, Willie Christine, and a younger brother, Alfred Daniel. He lived in a loving home with his parents, his brother and sister, and his grandparents. Martin's father, Martin Luther King Sr., was the pastor of Ebenezer Baptist Church in Atlanta. Martin was a member of his family's church. Just like Rosa Parks, Jackie Robinson, and Mary Bethune, Martin was born during a time when African American people in the United States did not have equal rights. Segregation kept people apart and prevented African Americans from being full and equal members of society. Martin was a very bright boy. He began attending school when he was 5 years old. He was a student at Alfred Elementary School. After elementary school, Martin attended Booker T. Washington High School in Atlanta. Because he was such a good student, Martin skipped 2 grades. At just 15 years of age, Martin became a student at the Morehouse College. Students usually start college at the age of 17 or 18, so Martin was very young to be a college student. At first, Martin considered becoming a doctor or a lawyer, but he later changed his mind and decided to become a minister, like his father and his grandfather before him. After graduating from Morehouse, Martin attended Crozer Theology Seminary. There, his studies prepared him for his work as a minister. Martin completed his education at Boston University. He received his doctorate when he was just 25 years old. A doctorate is the highest academic honor or degree awarded to a student. When someone receives a doctorate, they are called doctor. Martin was known as Dr. King. So that doesn't mean that they're a doctor, that they practice medicine. That's the highest degree you can earn in college. So first you can get an associate's degree, then a bachelor's degree, then a master's degree, and then a doctoral degree. Martin had not only gained a doctorate in Boston, he had also gained a wife, a beautiful young lady named Coretta Scott. Coretta had been studying music at the New England Conservatory in Boston. Upon Martin receiving his doctorate, he and Coretta moved to Montgomery, Alabama, where he became the minister of the Dexter Avenue Baptist Church. Martin was now ready to begin the career that he had prepared for. As a young teenager, riding city buses in the South, Martin had experienced the same discrimination that Rosa Parks had experienced. So what was some of the experiences of discrimination that Rosa or Martin must have faced on the bus? Yeah, African Americans had to sit in the back of the bus, and if the bus was full, the driver would ask a person of color to stand up so that a white person could sit down. Martin thought it was humiliating or embarrassing. And so, as well as being a pastor in Montgomery, Alabama, Martin decided that he would become a civil rights activist. When Rosa Parks challenged racial segregation in the Montgomery City bus system and a boycott began, Martin was asked to be the leader of the movement. Remember, a boycott is refusing to do business with something or someone. So they refused to do business with the buses. So instead of taking the buses, they walked. The African American community stood together under this leadership. They refused to ride the buses until they were able to choose the seat freely. The boycott lasted more than a year. People walked, rode bicycles, and rode in carpools to get to work. Martin led the boycott. Martin and his fellow activists were threatened and intimidated, but they did not back down. Finally, the United States Supreme Court, the most powerful court in the country, ruled that bus segregation was illegal and it had to stop. At that moment, Martin became one of the most important people in the American civil rights movement. In fact, Martin became its leader. Martin was prepared to be the leader of the civil rights movement, even though he knew he was putting himself and his family in danger. There were many people who did not like the changes he and his fellow activists wanted. For his part, despite the dangers, he insisted that those involved in the civil rights movement would remain peaceful and would never use force. What word did we learn in this read aloud that refers to this type of peaceful response to unfair treatment? they used non-violence. Martin believed that an organization, non-violent movement that protested against inequality with thoughtful words, not fists and guns, would succeed. He greatly admired others who used non-violence to protest. Martin and 60 other ministers and activists founded the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. This was an excellent way to organize members of African American churches throughout the country. They all worked together to try to bring about social changes that would improve the lives of all Americans. They also set out to register African Americans in the South to vote, so that they could use their power of their vote to bring about change. In his first speech to the group, Martin said, "We have no alternative but to protest. For many years, we have shown an amazing patience. We have sometimes given our white brothers the feeling that we like the way we're being treated. But we have come here tonight to be saved from that patience that makes us patient with anything less than freedom and justice." And so it began. African Americans living in the southern states where segregation was legal began to protest. Young African American students began to hold sit-ins at lunch counters that would not serve them. So sit-ins were nonviolent protests that involved people sitting down in a specific location. Many people of different races supported the civil rights movement. People rode buses from state to state and protested in places that practiced segregation. Over and over again they sat in at lunch counters, waiting rooms, and college campuses. Many people were arrested for taking part in these peaceful protests. Martin and his family moved to Atlanta, where he would work with his father at the Ebenezer Baptist Church. Both Martin's father and grandfather were ministers who had, during their lifetime, worked for equal rights for African Americans. The civil rights movement kept going. Martin and others continued to demonstrate peacefully and led marches. During one demonstration in Birmingham, Alabama, Martin was sent to jail. There he wrote his famous letter from the Birmingham jail. In this letter he explained that it was in his view that whereas just or fair, laws must be obeyed. Unjust or unfair laws, such as segregation laws, they must be ignored. So he's basically saying laws that are fair, I'm going to follow them. But laws that are not fair, like segregation, they don't need to be followed. The following year, Martin led a march on Washington, D.C. to pressure the government into changing segregation laws in southern states. More than 200,000 people watched from the Washington Monument to the Lincoln Memorial. There, in front of the memorial, Martin delivered his famous "I Have a Dream" speech. He said that he hoped for a day when people would not be judged based on the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. So character is how a person is on the inside, and how they act or treat people, which often reveals who they really are. Later, Martin was given one of the highest awards anyone can achieve, the Nobel Peace Prize. With this award came $54,000 in prize money, which he donated to a number of civil rights groups. Martin often felt threatened. He often feared for his own safety and that of his family. In his lifetime, Martin was jailed 30 times, but he was a peaceful warrior who fought with words. Sadly, in 1968, this courageous man was killed. This terrible tragedy happened in Memphis, Tennessee. Martin had gone to that city to support workers who were not being treated fairly. Martin seemed to have a feeling that he would not live to see the changes he wanted. The night before he died, Martin told a crowd gathered to hear him speak, "I have seen the promised land. I may not get there with you, but I want you to know tonight that we, as people, will get to the promised land." Because of Martin Luther King Jr. and those people involved with the civil rights movement, a law was passed called the Civil Rights Act, which banned segregation. So ban means it stopped or it prohibited something from happening. This was followed by a law called the Voting Rights Act, which removed any restrictions on the right to vote for African Americans. Martin Luther King Jr. had led the way for a better, brighter future for all people. Almost 20 years after his death, the United States Congress decided the third Monday in January would become a federal holiday in Martin's honor. On this day, we remember this extraordinary man for all that he achieved. Extraordinary describes something that is incredible or out of the ordinary. This day is now celebrated as a National Day of Service, where all people are encouraged to find ways to help others, just as Martin did during his life. There is also a monument not far from the Lincoln Memorial in Washington, D.C., from which Martin delivered his famous "I Have a Dream" speech. It opened to the public in August 2011. It is the first monument on the mall to honor an African American. The young boy who experienced discrimination grew up to become a national hero. Now it's time for our packet work. So the first one is a fill-in-the-blank paragraph review of what we learned today. Our words are dream, African Americans, rights, unfair, sit-ins, boycott, preacher, Martin Luther King Jr., and band. Hello, my name is Martin Luther King Jr. I was a preacher, but I was asked to lead a blank with Rosa Parks. A boycott. We felt that it was blank that all people did not share the same blank. We thought it was unfair that all people did not share the same rights. We also organized blanks at places that would not serve us. Sit-in. I spoke for all African Americans in my famous speech called "I Have a Dream." Later, a law was passed that blanked segregation, that banned segregation. If you need more time to fill it out, just go ahead and pause the video. Remember this page, when you are finished, you need to take a photo and send it to me or to Miss Dillon or Miss Kading. The first question says, what cause did Martin Luther King Jr. fight for? Your sentence starter is, Martin Luther King fought for blank. If you need more time, just go ahead and pause the video. Next is a vocabulary match. Our words are activist, banned, and sit-ins. The first one says, stopped or kept something or someone out. Is that activist, banned, or a sit-in? The next clue says, people who take some kind of action to achieve a goal. Are they activists, banned, or sit-ins? And the last one, a non-violent protest that involves a person or people sitting down in a specific location and refusing to move. The next question, what were some of the non-violent ways Martin Luther King Jr. worked for civil rights? So what were some of the actions that he took that were peaceful and non-violent? So the non-violent ways Martin Luther King Jr. worked for civil rights were: if you need more time, you can just go ahead and pause the video. The next question says, in what ways was Martin Luther King Jr. an extraordinary man? So what did he do that was amazing and impressive? So Martin Luther King Jr. was an extraordinary man because what is something he did? If you need more time, just go ahead and pause the video. And our last question today, you get to create extraordinary words by writing compound words. So a compound word is when you can put two words together to make an extraordinary word. So my example is book plus bag equals book bag. So you can go ahead and create your own compound words now, putting two words together. If you need more time, just go ahead and pause the video. Well, that's it for our lesson today, so make sure you're completing your assignment in your packet. And when you're finished, you need to take a picture of the page and send it to me or Miss Sillin or Miss Kading. You need to make sure that you're logging in to Edulastic. You can complete all of the assignments on there, but especially for core knowledge, I need you to complete the pausing point assessment, which will give you 3 Grow Our Team points. And like always, keep up the good work. Bye!